Hey, Colby.
Hey, Aurora, how are you doing?
I am doing great. How are you? I want to give people a few minutes to filter in before we officially start, like 2 minutes.
Yeah, we can. I'm
Um,
sure we can chit chat for a few minutes.
we can chit chat. You ready? You ready for RSA?
Ready as I'll ever be. I mean, it's driving in Sunday morning, so it's it'll start off with a bang.
Yes, I know. It's pretty much an entire series of bangs. We've really like scheduled ourselves through the whole time, but that's good, right? You
That's
don't want to just be
awesome.
standing around.
Yeah, it's funny. The first RSA I went to was in San Jose, and it was back, I don't know, 2002 or one or something like that. And it used to switch every year between San Jose and San Francisco. And I was just in San Jose this week for the NVIDIA conference, and I was trying to find a parking place in downtown San Jose, and it was intense. And I was just thinking to myself, like, there's absolutely no way that RSA could ever go back to San Jose. Like, it would not work.
No, it's like 40,000 people now or
Yeah.
more. That's not happening.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like seven conferences really going on at the same time, right? Like, San Francisco just turns into a cyber city for a week. Well,
Yeah.
not to mention Napa and Carmel and Monterey and all the other cool surrounding areas. But yeah, it's pretty
All
wild.
right. Okay. Awesome. So I think we can get started. Let me just
I
let
think
me
we're at capacity.
are we okay? Should we kick
I
some
mean,
people out?
it seemed, let me say, I
Where's the
think we might be at
bouncer?
capacity though. We might be breaking the internet.
All right. Well, then I guess let's get started as fast as we can before the internet dies.
That's
I'm
right.
Aurora Starita, product marketing here at Abstract, and of course, I am joined by my amazing CEO, Colby DeRodeff. And Colby, you're a very technical CEO. You're very hands-on, the roadmap, and I'm not, I mean, you did just say you went to RSA in 2002. So you're kind of admitting your own age. I'm not calling you old, but you've been
Oops.
in the sim game since
Yeah.
before sim was a sim.
Before Sim was
Um,
a Sim.
Before
Yeah.
sim was a sim. And you will be in the sim game after sim is not a sim.
Sim will
But
always be something.
sim is dead, quote unquote, has been a hot take for, over a decade. You wrote a whole manifesto that we published at the end of last month, pushing back on that. What made you finally put it to paper?
It's one of those things. I get extreme writer's block, so it's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. Like when we started the company, I wrote a thesis about abstract and what we're building, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things I said in there later that I was, removed from that thesis. But it's interesting, like really getting it out of your head and onto paper is very helpful sometimes, and I wanted to create something that described our vision and what we're building, and for our team to really align around, and for our customers and people partners and everybody that we work with to really understand how we look at this. And you know yes, to your point, I'm old. And I have been going to RSA since it was in San Jose, and flip flop every year. But that was back in my early days at ArcSight. And ArcSight was really the world's first dominant SIM on the market. And when I started at ArcSight, I think I was employee like 20 or 25 or something like that. The company had just transitioned from building the world's fastest web server and had just changed their name from Wahoo Networks to ArcSight, and decided that security was a thing, and we were going to go build, this collector of said security data. I'll go into that history kind of a little bit more, but um, over the course of, the 25 years or so that I've been in and around the SIM and security operations space, I've probably heard SIM is dead. Like, I don't know, every 5 or 6 years, some analyst will come out and say, SIM's dead. you don't need a SIM anymore. And I really think that, that kind of led me to this notion of, SIM is like Machiavelli, it fakes its own death a lot, but it never really dies, right? SIM is, I think, has become and has really morphed into, a state of mind. And, that's a little bit of a joke at the same time, but I also think it's true. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But I think it's, I relate it to Hotel California, right? And, Don Henley talked about Hotel California was not actually a place, but a state of mind. And, the reason that stuck with me is because when I was younger, my brother and I went to Cabo San Lucas and we drove out to Todos Santos, where Hotel California is. And so the whole time, me and my brother are driving there, we're listening to the Eagles and, having fun. We almost hit a cow. And we get to Hotel California, like, wow, the Eagles must have stayed here and all this. And, you know, lo and behold, we come to find out that the Eagles actually never went there. And the hotel was just named the Hotel California and probably gets a lot of visitors who think it was that. So long story short, SIM is a state of mind. Hotel California is a state of mind. And what that really means is that like SIM has been broken down into concepts. It's a thing that we need. We need to manage our security information. And SIM has always been the core of security operations. And I think we'll, continue to do that in the future. So, uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So let me ask you right now, like let's really dive in. When you say SIM is a state of mind, not a product, for somebody who just bought a SIM last year, what does that actually mean for them?
Well, it's great because it's something that they absolutely need, to run their security operations program. And, I think if you look at sort of the history of SIM and how this really kind of all got started, right, was, back in the 2000s, there were really this invention of like, intrusion detection systems, and organizations really started deploying security technology, early 2000s, and security really started becoming a thing. Um, and so the volume of data that was starting to be generated by all these intrusion detection systems, which were, very rich in false positives, you had host-based intrusion detection systems, you had antivirus, you had, firewalls, and these were really the main sources of data that folks used to bring into their SIM. And the reason they would do that, first and foremost, was so that when there was something they had to investigate, they didn't have to log into 15 different consoles and run different queries and searches and try to figure out what happened. It brought that all into a single pane of glass, and we're able to then start doing correlation across those different security log formats and from different controls, in order to try and reduce the number of alerts that analysts are responding to. Now, fast forward 25 years and you listen to what the market's talking about. How do we reduce the alert volume? How do we bring in data from all of these different systems? How do we get a single pane of glass? These are the things that SIM solves, right? And I think what's happened though over the years is that we keep, as technology evolves, right? The amount of data evolves, the complexity of the data evolves, right? We saw the big push to cloud over the last, decade plus, and the volume of data went, through the roof, right? And we're really just at the beginning of another one of these evolutions with AI, right? The volume of data that is coming out of agents and out of, business processes that are being run by AI basically is going to significantly increase the volume of data we have to deal with as security practitioners. And what happens is that the legacy technology wasn't designed to scale to these volumes, right? The same thing happened with ArcSight and with kind of generation one SIM. Back in like 2005, six, call it, compliance really became a thing, right? There was a big scandal at a company called Enron. Sarbanes-Oxley was getting enforced. PCI came out. And all of a sudden you had to collect logs from every system that wrote an event log. And you know, where were you going to put that, right? And so really the SIM, sometimes when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So, or maybe the inverse of that when you, no, anyways.
Oh, I think you
So
got
yeah. So
it.
people had their SIM, right? And they said,
Yeah.
well, this is a great place to put all this data, right? And then Splunk came along, right? And was like, hey, we're going to make it really easy to write all this data to disk and you can just search it when you want to. Now, all of the like real-time detection and security use cases kind of went by the wayside, and it became all about being PCI compliant or being Sarbanes-Oxley compliant, right? And so, for organizations that just brought on a SIM, welcome to the game. It's a journey, and I think that the nice thing about what we're doing at Abstract is, we can be part of that journey from the beginning, the end, etc. So
hmm So, I mean, speaking of sort of the genesis of Sims and the different generations, you have a line in the manifesto where you said that next gen sim is not a sim, and you mentioned that was even on the website at one point, and it was you were made to take it off. Um, I'm giving you the opportunity to make your case, though.
yeah. Okay. All right. Well, it's a little bit of a double entendre, I guess. And honestly, like I wasn't really made to take it off. I kind of, cooler heads prevailed, and I decided that we weren't just going to go after all of the next gen sim vendors right away. Um, but we were building, and we certainly are going after the next gen sim vendors, and that's why we've launched what we call AI-Gen, which is beyond next gen. But there is a reason, more than just kind of coming up with a better way to say next gen, right? Which I think AI-Gen is pretty cool for that. But when I looked at it, I said, okay, look at the companies that are talking about next gen sim and look at the technology, the actual fundamental underlying technology that these platforms are built on. Most of the next gen SIM platforms that are out there were built on legacy technology that was designed in like 2010 to compete with Splunk, right? And then this technology was acquired and a new dashboard was put on top of it, and it was called Next Gen SIM. And yes, it is a generation beyond the previous generation, but it's fundamentally the same kind of stuff. And so, that's definition one, is that next what's being called next gen isn't really next gen. But the other definition was like, is next gen sim really going to be what we all have in our minds as sim? And I think the answer to that is no. The future is very different than a monolithic, box, right? We used to all get our sims on an appliance, and all the sim vendors, we used to have different bezels for the appliance, and you'd have different color LEDs and diodes. And, I remember the ArcSight one, and, it'd be cool if we built an abstract appliance. Maybe we will, with like an LED A on it glowing in the data center, right? I think that would be pretty awesome. But, that's how we used to get our sims, right? Shipping appliances. I mean, I remember going to do proof of concepts, lugging a gigantic suitcase that Jorge, one of our partners back at ArcSight, used to cut the foam out with a big old knife and get the appliance to fit in there. And we'd lug it on airplanes and stuff, to get these boxes out to customers' data centers. And you'd spend the first, week of the proof of concept just getting the server in the rack and getting an IP address and all that. It was quite the process back then. Things are much different now, but the good old days.
Yeah, I know. It's less in person now, isn't it?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. The machines do it all. They download it, they install it, they run it, so yeah, times are
Yeah.
changing.
Well, to pick up on something that you just said a minute ago, you're talking about against this monolith, but at the same time, we're seeing across the market that, the vendors, and in some ways, even buyers are rushing to platformize, with the idea being like, well, if there's one vendor, there's one throat to choke, right? But you are arguing essentially that that's not the right instinct. Um, why? And also, why do you think that the other way has been winning so far? I don't know that we want to say that it keeps winning. We're coming to bat, but you know.
Yeah. Well, I think it's cyclical, right? And I think there is a story for platformization for some organizations that want to, really have, like you said, kind of one throat to choke. Typically, what you see though, when a vendor has too many solutions, you don't end up with best of breed in any of the areas. And that's the way these things usually start, right? And it's like we've seen this story before. Back in the day, it was McAfee and Symantec that had, a full suite of everything. And I remember, working with some very large banks that were Symantec shops, right? And they had Symantec on everything. And then Symantec bought Blue Coat, and then they had Symantec web gateways. And then, Symantec came out with a SIM that was by far subpar. But they would give it away for free, or they'd give it at a very discounted rate, so that organizations, it became like a no-brainer. But then the security teams would try to actually use the product, and they were very disgruntled with that. And we used to come in and displace, Symantec and McAfee SIM all the time, right? And those were both, acquired technologies that were just kind of bolted onto the stack. And so we see this kind of happening again and again. And like, from my perspective, what we've built is a way for organizations to grow with us, right? And that's this idea behind composability. And we work with a number of customers who leverage our full platform for, their modern security operations, including AI SOC. Um, and we work with some customers who use different pieces of our platform. So if it makes sense, we can kind of walk through, like, what do we mean by composable? What do
Yeah, I think it would be good to do that because I think that abstract sits in a really unique position where we can give you one throat to choke. If you just want to choke our throats, we got you. But there are other options. So yeah, let's go through it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So the way we approach this is basically to deconstruct really what SIM means. And when you look at the individual components and kind of break that apart, right? A SIM at its core is data collection, its detection capability, its retention of data, of telemetry data, and its security operations, right? So we've really broken this into like four key components: collection, detection, retention, and AI, what we like to call AI-enabled SecOps, which kind of breaks down into like hunting and triage and response and SOAR capability. But if you look at these modules within our platform, an organization can start by simply using our data pipelines and integrate our data through our pipelines into their existing security operations process. And so, there's a lot of benefits to doing that. There's cost reduction, there's really being able to shape and enrich the data before it lands at particular destinations, or the ability to send to multiple destinations. There's our detection capability, which is running in stream, right? So it's happening before the data is ever written to disk. There's our data lake, which is really very smart storage. It allows for you to bifurcate data between different levels of storage, and levels of storage equal cost of storage, right? And then there's the AI SOC component, which really is where analysts start interacting with and responding to the alerts, the detections that are happening, the insights within the platform.
Hmm. Yeah. And I guess I'm thinking about when I think sometimes the word composable can kind of sound a little bit like complex. So, how do you draw that line for a team that just wants to stop drowning in alerts? Like, is this very complex, even if it looks complex for them?
It's actually really easy, right? And I think that, if you look at kind of the AI pieces that are included, and what we mean by AI gen, we've basically baked AI into really all parts of the platform. And I mean, there's an advantage that we have. Like we started this company in 2023, so AI was already very much a thing and readily available. Obviously, it's gotten better and better over the last, tremendously better over the last couple of years. And so it's not a bolted on thing to our platform, right? It's like been designed in from the beginning and really baked into, everything that we do, from data collection to detection to, search and, investigations. And more coming down the pike there as we continue to build out the capabilities around that. So, um, when you look at the platform, right, and really kind of break this into its kind of core components, you have sort of the data collection side, and that's where a lot of organizations get started, right? Is really with security data pipelines and detections and trying to really get a handle on all of the telemetry sources that are feeding into their different security operations platforms. And we have some very unique capability here, right? We have a huge library of data connectors. One of the areas where we really focus is on SaaS-based applications. So being able to get your logs from, things like Salesforce or Workday or Zendesk. And, we see a lot of threat activity targeting these types of applications these days. And that's something that like traditional SIM has never really focused very much on, right? Has not focused much on sort of SaaS and cloud-based detections. And that's a big gap, right? And we see a lot of our customers actually, even if they're running competitive technology, actually bring us in just to get visibility around SaaS and cloud type applications, bring that data in, leverage detection logic that was designed by our threat research team, to focus on those type of telemetry sources, and then integrate that data into their existing SIM or XDR type capability. Um, so that's the beauty of the platform. Is very much a kind of crawl, walk, run approach. So you don't have to, fully rip and replace something, right? You could start with data pipelines, reduce your overall SIM, cost of ownership. You can add threat detection capability into those pipelines, which at that point, what you're doing is you're moving your detection, shifting left detection, right? That's I think a slogan we launched last summer. This was really all about, if you look at how detection is done in what we'll call next gen SIM and legacy SIM, um, the detection is done by collecting data, writing it to disk, indexing it, which that indexing process takes a lot of CPUs, a lot of hamsters on the wheel, and
Mhm.
takes potentially a long time in order to index all that data. And then detections are actually run as saved searches behind the scenes, querying that data every 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is. So if you start thinking about your mean time to detection, now you're behind the writing the data to disk, the indexing, and whatever query time is in place. And if you look at the SLAs from some of the next gen SIM providers, you'll even see in their SLAs that they do not guarantee anything near real time from a detection perspective. And it's documented. I mean, it's out there on the internet, right?
Yeah.
It's on
I
the
mean,
internet. It's true.
it's on the internet. It must be true.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think this
Um,
might be a good time to ask about, there's a lot of buzz around a federated SIM model, you know, because
yes.
you've just outlined the problem with the traditional model, and so now we have this federated. That's the big thing right now. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about it. I mean, I think, federated SIM is very interesting in concept. But once you start peeling back the onion, you'll see that data centralization is actually a requirement. And a lot of the vendors that originally came out talking about, oh, we're going to do this fully federated thing, are all now shifting to data centralization because they've probably realized, once you start peeling back the onion there, that it's not something that's going to work. There's a couple key reasons, right? I mean, I think first of all, one of the use cases of SIM is data retention. So by law, organizations are required to store data for a certain amount of time, depending on the vertical, the industry that you're in. There's different regulations you have to adhere to. So think about that process if you're federated. All of the data being stored at the original data generating control or system, you're going to have to manage retention policies on like 200 different systems. And even worse, some of those systems don't even allow for extended periods of data retention, right? So that's just like, that's kind of a very basic thing. And so I think the first thing that we're seeing already is that some of the federated messaging is changing to, well, centralize some of it. Okay, so now
Mhm.
you're no longer really federated. You're part centralized, part federated. Okay, great. So let's peel back the onion a bit further. Let's say you want to do detection use cases. So now you're doing query-based detection, except you're doing it across many different systems. So you can't hit APIs of these different controls on a every second type basis, right? That just won't work. Like so you're putting the queries on a schedule. So by putting it on a schedule, you're already increasing your mean time to detection because what are you going to schedule for? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, every hour, right? So there you go. Now, where this gets even more interesting is that if you think about the threat intelligence use case and you're bringing in like abstract does, we bring in hundreds of thousands, millions of indicators from many different threat intel sources, integrate those into the data stream so that every event that's coming through the stream is being compared to the threat intelligence that you have available to you. Now imagine trying to do that against 200 different APIs or 50 different APIs or whatever it is. And you have 100,000 new indicators coming in and you're querying those APIs for 100,000 indicators. You're saying, have you seen this IP address? Have you seen this domain? Have you seen this, file hash? You're going to get rate limited so fast by the vendor's APIs that you're hitting. Either that or you're going to pay a significant cost in order to basically continue to use those APIs at scale, right? So look, there is some value in federation. Don't get me wrong, our platform is federated in the sense that we can create sets of data where it makes the most sense, right? So if you have
Mhm.
data that lives in the EU or you have data that lives in particular geographies or regions or segments of your business, you can deploy instances of the abstract platform into those regions. Now, the other argument is, well, data storage costs. Well, we also leverage object storage. So the storage cost is significantly cheaper. I mean, pennies on the dollar compared to what you would pay by putting all this data into like a traditional next gen SIM platform. So from my perspective, where federation starts to make even more sense is for context for our AI SOC processes, right? Or our AI enabled security operations. I don't really even like to call it AI SOC, but that's where federation, being able to query out and get context information to enrich, to provide more context to an analyst during an investigation, or provide more context to an agent that's doing an investigation on the analyst's behalf, to me, that's where federated makes the most sense. And so, you know, love the debate. I love innovation and I love looking at new and great ways to solve this challenge because this is a challenging space. I mean, this is not like another web portal that you go build, right? This is infrastructure technology. It's complex. It's a big system, and there's different approaches, and some of them work, some of them don't, and that's the name of the game. So.
Okay, well, we are pretty much at time here, so I just want to give you one last one, just kind of the takeaway. If the audience walks away with one thing today from you, one shift in how they think about security and data, what do you want it to be?
I would say composability. Just think truly about what that means in your organization and what the world would look like if you had flexibility to really deploy best of breed technology to solve specific challenges that you're having, right? That flexibility has always been something in my mind that is key to successful teams and successful outcomes in cyber.
All right. Thank you, Colby, and thank you for everybody who
Yeah.
joined us. We did get a couple questions and we didn't get to them. So I'm gonna have well, we will reach out to you, people who ask questions. So thanks so much
I
for
mean,
joining us, and we'll see you next month at our next webinar. Take
see you
care.
next month or see you sooner at RSA.
Yeah,
Thanks for
or see
spending
us at
some time with
RSA.
us today.
Yes, book some time with us. All right, take care.
All right. Cheers.